Hello. So I'm going to be talking about two subjects which have a lot in common. And I'm going to show you how they have a lot in common. And one of them is to do with Oxford lunatic attempt to regulate traffic by instituting a series of low traffic neighbourhoods based on inaccurate data. And the other one is to do with a comment made by the Merseyside Assistant Chief Constable after the conviction of a criminal, a gangster, who was involved in a shootout that caught an innocent bystander. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you I am Granniopteryx on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. I'm also on Twitter, Gab and Parler. All the links to those channels and platforms are in the description. Please like this video. Please share it. Please subscribe if you're on YouTube. Remember, you have to check that you're still subscribed. You can also help my channel financially. Again, all the links are in the description. Now, let's talk about this. You see, the Merseyside Assistant Chief Constable said that everyone involved in the chain is responsible after a drug dealer was convicted of the murder of a 9-year-old child when he chased another gangster into that child's home. People who use recreational drugs are responsible for fueling the organised crime that led to the murder. The police chief in charge of the investigation into her killing has warned. I like the way the Telegraph refers to that as warned. It's not warned. It's crazy association of events. It's like somebody telling me I'm responsible for a fatal road accident because I drink Tesco's coffee and the person responsible for the accident was driving a Tesco's van. People who use recreational drugs, it's not usually that they want to use recreational drugs. It's because they're hooked and they're as much victims as anyone else. But you see, the police are the police and it's their job to chase criminals. So they don't think in terms of sorting out the problem from the root. I read a book called Good Cop, Bad Cop. Called Good Cop, Bad War. And this fellow here, Neil Woods, was an undercover policeman who, well, this is his words. For 14 years, Neil Woods would leave behind his wife and 2 young children, put on stained tracksuit bottoms and turn up in a town somewhere in England as a drug addict. Using a new cover story each time, the undercover drug squad officer would gradually befriend destitute addicts, ingratiate himself with their dealers, buy drugs from them, and then have the whole lot sent to jail. He realised that it was all wrong. That is, they would arrest a drug gang and within hours, sometimes minutes, a new drug gang would take the place of the one that had been taken off the streets. And furthermore, it's a matter of some sort of horrible evolution, because the drug gang that replaced the removed one would be more vicious, more criminal, more violent, and to keep its clients from telling on them. And they'd also be cleverer. Woods records that at the beginning of his career, he gave the drug dealer some marked money. And he said nowadays all drug dealers know about that. But at the time, it was everyone was very naive, and the police, in their campaign to stop drug dealing, actually made the drug dealers worse. So why were they doing this? Well, there are several reasons. The first is it's the police's job to catch drug dealers. If they don't catch anybody, then they don't have a job. And that must be at the backs of their minds. And the second thing is ideology over reality. Drugs are bad, so we've got to react in a violent way to their existence and the existence of their dealers. There used to be a system in Britain of registering drug addicts. I think it was actually called the British system. And that was in the 60s. If you became an addict, you could register. You got a health service folder. You could go and get a prescription for the drug from your doctor. And I think there were it was something really silly, like 1,000 registered addicts in the country. And after, I think, again, I may not be right about this, but it was American pressure that this wasn't the right way to deal with it. So they stopped doing that. And now there are, I don't know what, 20,000. I'm just throwing out figures here. I don't remember exactly, but it was something as spectacular as that as soon as it went underground. But this is the triumph of ideology over reality. And here we have another instance in Oxford where they have instituted LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods, and they instituted these. You see this planter here with nothing in it, stopping cars from using this road. The Department of Transport admitted earlier this week that the government data, which supposedly showed a rise of traffic on smaller roads, was significantly overcounted. Somebody in the Department of Transport had counted a 10% rise in traffic on small roads as a 26% rise. Now, whether they did that deliberately or they just weren't any good at maths, I cannot say. But according to an interview I saw in which an Oxford councillor was talking about this very issue, I seem to remember that councillor saying that the council knew about it, knew that those figures weren't right, but pushed ahead anyway, because the reality was not important as how they felt about stopping people from using their cars. And just like, as Neil Woods has pointed out, making an ideological issue out of something doesn't cure it. He knew the reality. He finally stopped doing what he was doing. He saw how generous and good-hearted many of the addicts were. How many of he records one. She'd been abused as a child. She used drugs to block the memories. And what she'd do was she would go off the drugs for a while, every so often, however painful that was. She'd go off the drugs and she'd be clean, but the memories started coming back, and then she'd go back onto the drugs to damp them down. This is a terrible life she had, and he was responsible for her being arrested because she was caught up in she was a client of the drug ring that he was going after. And he said this was an awful thing. He realised how awful it was. Let's see. He is now a leading light in the Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, an international organisation of serving and former police, prison, military and intelligence officers. You see, people who really know what it's like there at the coalface, who want the public to know about the unconscionable damage they have seen the war on drugs do. This is the Telegraph. Well, this isn't a time to talk about grammar, is it? So it's called LEAP, and what they are doing is fighting an ideology. And as we all know, it's very difficult to fight an ideology once someone has it in their mind. And even when they know it's not true, like the people in Oxford, they will continue to do this because an ideology is more comforting, easier to handle than reality. And so back to this silly comment from the Merseyside Assistant Chief Constable, who says that anyone who uses recreational drugs is responsible for fueling the organised crime, instead of realising that it's the police, well, persecution's probably the wrong word, but the police war against drugs, of which he is a part, that has forced criminals to evolve from little backstreet traders to armed gangsters, then I can say he is responsible in the same way. And we really do have to start looking at what's real and how to deal with the reality of the world, just like this Oxford Council are not doing. There's a feeling abroad that if somebody's in power, then it's their ideology is the truth, their truth. And it isn't. And of course, it never leads to a solution. It just leads to more misery. All right, till next time.
Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the granniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.